And welcome to the Patriots No Huddle podcast. As always, Steve Balestrieri, Mike Diabate, Derek Havens here with Christopher Price, friend of the show. Christopher, it's so great to see you. I'll call you Chris from now on because I know you prefer that. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. It's been too long. Steve reminded me it's been almost exactly a year since I joined you guys. So it's been too long. It's good to be back.
Yeah, and we already had a show before a show, but we have to keep that stuff offline because we can't go ahead and reveal all the secrets. But before I go ahead and jump to the guys for questions, I have to ask you, overall, just kind of overview of the draft class. Obviously, big draft for the Patriots. Mike Vrabel comes in. Will Campbell, pretty much a target, but there's some really exciting picks here coming up. Do you have a favorite pick and of the class aside from Will Campbell? And what were your thoughts on the class overall?
I've been a big Kyle Williams fan so far. I just did that piece for him on him for the Globe. They ran a couple of days ago. It's interesting when you stack him against some of the other rookie wide receivers the Patriots have had over the years. And I'm not saying this is a blanket statement when it comes to all the guys, but one of the things that impressed me about Kyle Williams is the Steve Smithiness of his attitude and approach and style. The
I've
way
heard that a few times, actually.
It's just his combative nature on the field. I think that he's not intimidated. He's not going to be cowed by a whole lot. From talking to people who've worked with him and who know him fairly well. I even talked to his dad, who just said, look, he worshiped at the altar of these guys. It was Steve Smith, it was Marvin Harrison, it was Stephon Diggs. Those were the three guys that he grew up loving. And I think it bodes well that he's going to be a teammate of Diggs. And he really, in a lot of ways, was mentored by Steve Smith, a guy who was really probably should have been a Patriot, one of those great what ifs of, a decade or so ago. So if I had to take a guy other than Will Campbell, who I really like, I would take Kyle Williams as my guy, my favorite rookie so far from what we've seen.
Yeah, it's really too bad that Will Campbell can't even bend over and tie his shoes with his arms being so short. But what are you gonna do? But no, I'm really excited about the draft class in general. What are your vibes? And Mike, I'm gonna go to you right after this. What are your vibes that you get from Mike Vrabel coming over to the building? Obviously, there's been a lot of turnover the last couple of years with coaching staffs for different positional groups, and obviously in the head coaching office. What are your thoughts about Mike Vrabel coming into the building? I know you've been covering the beat for a long time. Were you a part of the beat when Vrabel was here's a player?
Yes.
So did you ever? So okay, let me step back. Then I'll ask you a two-parter. Did you ever think that Vrabel was going to be a head coach when he was a player? And what are your thoughts about everything that's going on around him here now that he's actually the head coach of the Patriots?
I did think he was going to be a coach. I didn't think he was going to be a head coach. I thought he was the sort of guy who would be a defensive coordinator, linebackers coach. I didn't know how much of that would translate to, his attitude, his approach, his coaching style would translate on the offensive side of the ball, but it's done very well so far. At the combine, I'll share a story with you. When he was coming down in an elevator, I was waiting for the elevator. He comes out, he sees me, he reaches out, he goes like this. He says, let's have a day. He's got swagger, he's got energy, he's got attitude.
As your son would say, he's got aura. Chris.
Exactly.
That's
aura. He inspires confidence. And I think that goes a long way, at least when it comes to the performative nature of the job. And you guys, I think, all understand what I'm saying here. You need to have a little bit of swagger when you're a head coach in the National Football League. You have to be able to puff your chest out when, you need to be able to assert yourself. And again, look, a lot of it is kind of BS, kind of performative BS, but that plays in the locker room. That plays with free agents. That plays, when you talk about relating to other guys in the locker room, when you talk about relating to players, that kind of stuff has been received very, very well in Foxborough so far. There is an energy, there is an enthusiasm, there's an excitement. Look, it could all dissipate if things go south in November and they're, 5-11 and people are complaining. And, I understand all that. This could all be very short-lived, but at least in this moment, you have a level of confidence, energy, and enthusiasm in Foxborough that maybe wasn't necessarily there over the last couple of years with the other coaches.
Mike, what about you? What do you got?
Chris, always a pleasure to speak with you, my friend. It's great to have you on the show tonight. And a little bit of an offshoot from what you were saying there with regard to that swagger that's kind of coming back to the Patriots locker room. Obviously, a lot of people are making a big deal about Drake May's day yesterday and throwing the 4 picks. And I'm never going to knock a guy for playing a little subpar in OTAs, but one guy that I thought had a very good day was Christian Gonzalez.
Yeah.
Obviously, a couple of interceptions. He's right there in every play that he needs to make. Even when he was beat, he was still solid in coverage. And a lot of what we heard from him afterwards when he spoke with you guys in the media on Tuesday was a confidence, a desire to maybe step up and be a little bit more of a vocal leader, maybe a little bit more of a example type leader in the locker room. These are things that Christian really didn't have a reputation of doing when he was at Oregon, but you're seeing it now. Do you think maybe some of that Vrabelian swagger, maybe some of that confidence that Mike is exuding in the coach's room and when he speaks to the team, you think that could help to rub off and maybe help Christian maybe evolve into a role like that?
I think that Christian Gonzalez distinguished himself the first couple of years as almost being unnervingly quiet. The guys who
like a Gilmore type, kind of.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. That's a perfect way to put it, Derek. He really was a Gilmore type, and that he didn't say a lot. And so I think he's cautious, Mike. I think it's a great point. At the same time, I think he's cautious about being perceived as not being consistent. He's going to be a guy who's going to let his play speak, but at the same time, I think you're going to see that across the entire defense. I think that your point is a really good one. That the Vrabelian confidence level, the swagger, the attitude, the approach, that's going to permeate across all 3 levels of the New England defense going into 2025. There's going to be a tremendously high level of energy, a tremendously high level of really excitement, and I think you're going to see Gonzalez talk probably a little bit more as he continues to become more confident. I asked him, I said, do you feel more emboldened this year going into 2025? Because all of a sudden you're one of the veterans on the defensive side of the ball. You're one of the veteran cornerbacks on this team. And he kind of hemmed and hawed a little bit and said, well, I think my goal is just to kind of be consistent, be not talk too much. But I do think we're going to see those moments this year when he is going up against, I don't know, Jamar Chase, or going up against, Tyreek Hill, that he's going to be able to, and we're going to see him, probably be a little bit more demonstrative on the field. I'll say that going into 2025 because he's in the position he's in and he has the head coach that he has.
Gentlemen, I think we just heard Chris Price make up the verb verbelli.
Verbellion? That was Mike, right?
I phrased the question. But I love the way Chris put it. So definitely, Chris, if you want equal claim on that, I'd be more than happy. You're one of the very few in this business that I tip the cap to.
Trademark Patriots No Huddle podcast.
I'll tell you. Nice plug, Chris. Nice plug. No, I'll tell you. Christian McCaffrey was the best. Steve and I shared a lot of training camp practices, and the Panthers, seeing Christian McCaffrey's feet in person, the only person I've ever seen that have smoother feet than him was Christian Gonzalez. Just unbelievable. It's hard to describe, and articulate how well they move as athletes. It's like a totally different speed. Exactly. I remember CMC moving through like the speed ladder, and I was like, this guy is not built like the other guys. They're all pro athletes, but
there's a liquidity there about him.
Liquidity's great. Yep.
That I don't think exists with a lot of players, even at that position, where you have to have that sort of change of direction, quickness, that ability to be able to move and to be able to shift at a moment's notice. He has that, and he has it at a level that, as you mentioned, not a lot of other guys do.
No, it's unbelievable. Steve, what do you got?
Well, folks, you guys, our listeners, you missed a great podcast. We were having some technical issues. We had a great podcast going
before the podcast, pre-pod.
And TreVeyon Henderson, because I know there was a lot of talk, especially this afternoon by certain people, that will remain nameless on 2 to 6, but they were talking about, was he an overreach? And everything I heard about the first day of OTAs, the speed factor of TreVeyon Henderson is there. How do you think Josh McDaniels is going to? I'm not sure he's even going to ease him in. I think this kid's going to play a lot this year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we're headed for, the days of split carries and, 3 different guys gaining like 450 yards on the season.
Little like RBBC.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what we're going to see. I think that Ramondre is still going to be part of the equation. If things hold between now and the start of the year. But look, Henderson is coming, and Henderson's ability to take care of the football. And now, granted, it's different from college football to the pros, and he's going to have to make those adjustments. His ability in blitz pickup, his ability to work as a 3-down back, I think that can't be overlooked. I will say this, Steve, when the pick was made, I was a fan of the player, but I wasn't necessarily a fan of the pick because I thought they had more pressing issues on the board. After getting a chance to watch him a little bit, I understand and talk to Elliott Wolf about the speed factor that he brings. I understand a little bit more about why they went after him, where they went after him. And then the other thing, too, and we can get into this a little bit, there was some discussion about number 38. They initially, it was Henderson or Jonas Ivanea for the offensive lineman out of Arizona. And the fact that the Dolphins traded up to 37 to take Ivanea, that kind of eliminated any sort of discussion. But we could have been here having a talk about, the Patriots double dipping with their first 2 picks along the offensive line. I think Henderson is a great piece of the puzzle. And I think he's going to be really interesting to watch when it comes to, how Josh McDaniels decides to use him. But I'm just fascinated by, all the maneuvering that went on there at number 38 and whether they wanted him and, it's specific to the position.
Well, the second day is always weird, Chris, because you have the 32 picks and there's a lot of information that teams have beforehand. There's a lot of picks where they know exactly what teams are picking in front of them. 38 is a little bit difficult because you get 24 hours to go ahead and have that kind of reset period. Mm-hmm. And Vinea was definitely in play for the Patriots. I know that for an absolute fact. And they were thinking about that. But then the other thought was, well, we have some left guard here, but what they really wanted to do, and I'm not saying this like I know have like I'm not sitting here like Adam Schefter, like I have some like inside information. They clearly wanted to go ahead and add explosiveness to the offense, and they wanted to protect Drake May. That was clear throughout the draft, and that's inarguable. I mean, look at what they did. As Fred Kirsch from Patriots.com, good friend of mine, always says, don't listen to what they say. Look at what they do. Look at what they did. They add a left tackle with 66 starts in the SEC, add an explosive guy who blew up the Senior Bowl in Kyle Williams when they need some explosiveness there. TreVeyon Henderson is like a souped up Shane Vereen in my mind in terms of like being able to, pull away, as we had Evan Lazar on not too long ago, talked about blowing away pursuit angles. I think it's going to be a lot of fun for them to kind of play around with that stuff. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, that offensive line is a question. That left guard spot to me, Chris, is the biggest thing to me that I'm kind of, as we're heading into mini camp and training camp, I know it's not a sexy position, okay? But like it's not Dante's Inferno anymore. But that left guard position to me is still probably one of the biggest things. And there's other things too, but the left guard position to me, I'm still wondering about when you're heading into mini camp and training camp. What do you think is something that you're going to be keeping your eye on the most? If there was one position, could you narrow it down to one?
Along the offensive line specifically?
In general.
Just in general. I mean, there's 2 or 3 positions, and this is kind of, we were kind of having some fun before the podcast started. But look, for my money, it's the whole season is going to come down to whether or not their elite players can match their potential. And it's like 6 guys, and for me, Campbell's one of those guys at the left tackle spot. I think the left guard question is a really good one. We saw Cole Strange out there running with the ones, and when we saw them on OTAs, and I would have to think that he's at least the incumbent right now for what it's worth. You have Garrett Bradbury at center, Owenu, and then Morgan Moses. In an ideal world, I think that's the 5 that you take into the regular season, and you hope that everything kind of holds together. So, but yeah, there's literally, like I said, there's 6 guys that this season hangs on. Will Campbell's one of them. Diggs, Drake May, and then on the other side of the ball, it's like Barmore, Gonzalez, and I think I forget who the other name we had out there, but it was just like that. Those are the guys who have to play at a very high level if this team wants to shot at, let's say, 500. I just think, for me, ultimately it comes down to like the position that matters the most out of all those. We talked about the premium positions. If Will Campbell can play, that answers a lot of questions, not just at the left tackle spot, but at the left guard spot, because then you have a left tackle who could theoretically kind of paper over some of the deficiencies maybe you have at the left guard spot. And it's a domino effect. And we saw that last year with the offensive line. One guy went down and it affected everyone else, affected this guy, it was a mess. But I guess really for me, as we're sitting here talking about this, it's left tackle. If Will Campbell can play left tackle on a consistently high level, even with the arms and the shoulders and all that, I think this team is going to be set up for success. If he, for whatever reason, ineffective play, injury, whatever, if he can't play, then there's going to be a lot of questions on the offensive side of the ball. And again, we know, you guys, and we've talked about this before, a great offensive line makes a bad quarterback good and a good quarterback great. It's going to impact the running game. It's going to impact Drake May. It's going to impact their ability to play complementary football. It is just a domino effect that's just going to impact the entire roster in a lot of ways if Will Campbell can't play.
Yeah, no, makes total sense. Mike, what do you got?
Chris, I'm going to flip over to the opposite side of the ball for just a moment, and a player that you just mentioned in Christian Barmore. And I think all of us are pleasantly surprised and definitely elated that Christian seems to be turning the page from the health problems that he's had. He's moving forward. He looks like he's very much singularly focused on helping the Patriots and that defense rise to levels that they fell from last year. Take us a little bit through your thoughts on Christian. First of all, how surprised are you that he's back on the field, that he looks to be, ready to go and in game, or as close to in-game action as we expect him to be at this time? And how do you think the presence of guys like Milton Williams, and even when you look at someone like a Keon White maybe taking that next step this year, how is that going to help Christian in his endeavors to get back to where he needs to be on the field?
Mike, it's easy to look at him and think and dream about the potential of this front seven. It really is. And we talked about how Campbell is the first domino in a series of, everything is interconnected on the offensive side of the ball. You can make an argument that a lot of what the Patriots want to get done defensively starts with him. Right. If he is healthy, if he is able to give you, 65 snaps a game, 60 snaps a game as a 2-down guy, maybe a 3-down guy, it changes everything. It really does if he's completely healthy. I'll tell you, an inside journalism thing here. Christian Barmore keeps his inner circle very, very tight. And his agent doesn't talk to a lot of people, and he doesn't have anyone else. He's got everybody on lockdown. So I've kind of joked with him about that in the past, and he's like, yeah, that's what I like. Usually with superstars, you can kind of find a wedge in and talk to him about that and find a trainer or an agent or someone. He doesn't say anything to anyone, and he keeps everyone on notice that, look, all the information is going to flow through me. So he's very hard to get information on subsequently. And so when we saw him, that was the first time we talked to him since like December. He's looked good. I think he didn't look limited in any way the other day. I talked to some other guys on the roster. They say that Barmore has been there since the jump. And
I've heard he's look, Chris. I don't want to cut you off, but I heard he looked a little thinner. Did you?
He does look a little thinner. He does, but it's not worrisome. I'll say that it's not. It's not at a point where you go, I don't know, how's that guy going to hold up? But if you can put him there, and you can have a combination of Milton Williams and Keon White and just the linebacking group that they have, and the rest, it's just things will go very well if Christian Barmore is completely healthy for this team for 17 games this season. I think that's the best possible scenario. If he's out there, if he's playing consistently, then only good things are going to happen to this defense. So, yeah, I mean, he is, for me, like we mentioned before, he's on the short list of those elite players. If you can get a great year out of him, it's going to change things. It's going to change what they could do on the defensive side of the ball on all three levels.
I think that's something that we're that's something that I think we're so excited to watch and see if it comes to fruition. We remember how good he was at taking on the double team and allowing someone like a Matthew Judon a free flow to the quarterback, and the pass rush really came alive. If Christian is even 75% of what he was at that point, the Patriots are definitely dealing with a position of strength there. And then you add in guys like Kyrios Tonga, who we haven't talked about, a potential nose tackle if he's on the roster, and the linebackers that they've added, and guys like Spillane and Jack Gibbons and Harold Landry. A lot of fun to watch this year. That front seven is definitely something I'm looking forward to watching.
Landry is the name that I forgot to bring up. I wanted to make sure he was involved in that conversation as well. And look, this is the time of year you should be optimistic. It was funny. We were joking before, and I've joked with Taylor about this. Shooting a shot with predicting 13, predicting 13 wins for this team. You should be. I love the optimism for this time of year. That's where everyone should be. Everyone should feel like they got a shot. I don't necessarily think they're going to, I would be a little bit more modest in my prediction for the 2025 season. But yeah, you look at both sides of the ball, particularly what they did on defense. This defense on paper is far superior to the group that they had here last year. I'm not the only concern, but maybe the biggest concern I have is their ability to pick up on the new defensive scheme. This is a much more penetrating, much more disruptive defensive scheme than they've had here in 20 plus years. This is about the defensive linemen getting into the backfield as opposed to the linebackers flying around and making plays. And, the days of two gapping with Vince Wilfork and, Ted Washington taking up 2 and 3 blockers.
Keith Trailer.
Keith Trailer types.
Like we're talking about what, $56 million being spent on the 2 defensive tackles.
Yeah,
on the interior of that defensive line.
And the other thing too, I mean, we could talk about this. It has kind of a whiff of the Philadelphia model. It's about building out from the trenches, and I know that's not unique. I know that's, they're not the first team to come up with it, but it's hard not to look at them and then look at what some other teams, including the Patriots, have done around the league this year and said, look, that's the model that we want to follow. What they did, just load up front on both sides of the ball, and we'll take our chances.
But so Steve, I want to go to you next. But honestly though, Chris, that's funny that you bring that up, because it's funny because as more and more as the modern NFL game goes to the edges, where we're talking about receivers, pass rushers, cornerbacks, receivers, all these things, well, it still is played in the trenches, and you can still win up front in the trenches. And the Eagles were proving that over and over again. They dominated Kansas City up front in that Super Bowl. Yeah, and it's not a secret. They knew what they were doing. I still think the whole tush push thing is to me, I think it's a joke. They were even trying to get it banned, but that's a whole different podcast for a different day. But we won't talk about that right now. But I do think that as much as the game is played on the edges now, it really is up front on the line of scrimmage where you really still make your hay.
Yeah, and part of that, though, is also on the offensive side of the ball. You need a once-in-a-generation back in Saquon Barkley to make it work on offense. You need a quarterback like Jalen Hurts who understands his role in all of that to be able to kind of get it all. But yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, that's where football's played. It's the physical aspect of it all. It's about getting after it. It's about pushing the other guys back. It's about dominating. It's about winning the line of scrimmage. And Philadelphia has been able to do that better than anyone else. These are the last year plus. And it's easy to look at that model and say that's the direction that we want to go. And so I think there's all sorts of other aspects that go into it, but you want to boil it down. I mean, that's the approach that I think that one of the approaches that they're going with.
Well, when you find a left tackle who is a 7th round rugby player who turns out to be just a fucking stud, now that's how you go ahead and win it all.
Well, and you also have, if you're the Patriot, I mean, you have Stephen Neal, You know,
Yep.
you have
The rest who was a wrestler.
Yeah, exactly. You find an undrafted free agent like David Andrews. You know, you find guys like that who you can drop in and amongst the elite blue chippers of that group.
Mike and Wenyu, 6th-round draft pick.
Exactly. And the whole thing keeps moving forward. So look, I'm not saying it's the ultimate answer, but it's not completely coincidental that the Patriots have moved in that direction in the wake of what the Eagles did.
Absolutely. Steve, over to you, buddy.
Do you got time, Chris? I know.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when Vrabel came on, Terrell Williams, they were talking about an aggressive, violent defense. They used the word violent several times. And I thought at the time that Robert Spillane would be a perfect fit for this unit. What's your thoughts on him and how he'll work out with them?
And Jack Gibbons, by the way, if you can just piggyback both of them.
Yes. Two guys who are, if you want to look up Vrabel guys in the dictionary, Spillane and Gibbons are right there, man. They really are. And they're not going to confuse anyone with, Mike Singletary, but they're both like Spillane. I mean, Spillane was recruited to Ohio State by Vrabel.
Mm-hmm.
This is a guy who grew up in Ohio idolizing Vrabel. This is a guy who will run through a wall for Mike Vrabel. Those two signings exemplify the Patriots' ability to build out the middle class of that roster in a way that they weren't able to do the last couple of years. Neither of these guys are going to make the Pro Bowl. Neither of these guys are going to be all pros. But if you want to win a championship, you need guys like that. I'll put Mac Hollins in that group as well. These are veterans who've been around for a couple of years, who know their role, who know that they're role players, kind of quote unquote, who know what they have to do to be able to get on the field and stay on the field on a consistent basis. They're not going to be asked to do anything outside their comfort zone. But if they execute, they're cost-effective guys. They're great locker room guys. They are the kind of guys who can seamlessly integrate into a number of parts on the roster. They're coachable. There's a long list of guys like that on this team. I would also put Morgan Moses in that conversation as well. These are guys who are culture builders in addition to their ability to contribute on the field. Spillane, Gibbons, Moses, Hollins. You can put some other guys in there as well that I'm forgetting right now. But when you think about Mike Vrabel and his directive to improve the culture, create a championship culture again in Foxborough, these are the type of guys that you need to go out and get. Again, I'm not saying they're going to be the answer on defense, those two guys specifically, but we are going to get to a point in the season where on Sunday night or Monday morning, we are going to be talking about a play that Robert Spillane made. Or that, can you believe the play that Gibbons made that allowed the Patriots to stay in that game that set them up for success down the road? These are smart football players. They're veteran football players who know exactly what they need to do to get the job done. And again, for me, that is validation that it's not just the elite guys that we mentioned before, but their ability to build out the middle class of that roster. That's going to be one thing that's going to separate them from last year's group.
Yeah, and during the Bill glory years, it was Brady. They always filled out that middle class with guys that people would say, when they signed them. And then, in December and January, you're like, oh my, this guy, now we know why they got him.
Yeah.
With that in mind, talking about the linebackers, how do you think Jelani Tavai fits into all this?
That's a fantastic question.
I don't see it.
I don't. I wouldn't be surprised if Jelani Tavai was not on the roster come week one.
Yep.
I'll say that. I think that, and it's not necessarily a shot at him, but consider the roster turnover. Consider the type of player that they've gone after. And on the surface, Tavai may kind of be able to reshape his game enough to a point where they could they could have him fit. But he's a guy who may be facing longer odds to make this team come week one than maybe some of the other veterans on the roster. It's a great question. I don't know. I'll put it this way. I think his future in Foxborough is uncertain as we sit here in mid to late May.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you.
As Paul Perillo would say, don't buy green bananas.
Yeah,
Yes.
don't buy green bananas.
I always say, if you're leasing, don't lease year to year, lease month to month.
Yeah, 100%. I got one more question, but I want to go to Mike first, and then we'll wrap up. So, Mike, you run through it first, then I'll go to the next one, and then we'll wrap up.
All right, sounds good. Chris, obviously, all eyes are going to be on Drake May in the coming weeks and his progression as he makes his sophomore leap, so to speak, and trying to become one of the top echelon quarterbacks in the NFL in due time. I'm not saying it's going to happen this year, but that's the expectation that a lot of people have of him in Foxborough. He's got the ideal guru around him right now in Josh McDaniels. In your opinion, is this a marriage made in heaven between Josh and Drake this year? Do you expect him to bring out the best in the youngster? And what have you seen in the very limited scope that you've looked at so far that would lead you to believe that this ship is headed in the right direction?
I think it is headed in the right direction, Mike, but I think it's going to take some time. I think we're going to see some performances like we saw, the other day with the 4 picks. And then, he also, by the way, he bounced back and went 7 for 8 after that and looked really good. But I think it's like everything. I think it's going to take time. I think, what he learned last year, the Alex Van Pelt offense, I'm not taking a shot at AVP, but he's got to kind of unlearn a lot of that and kind of focus over here. I have a lot of faith in Josh McDaniels from talking to, the players on the roster, the former players, the fact that he can grow and evolve and change as a head coach or as an offensive coordinator and kind of learn how to bring out the best in Drake May. But I think it's going to just take some time to get there. I don't think that he's going to come out and throw for 400 yards in the season opener against the Raiders. I think it's a work in progress. I think ultimately, like anyone else, you just want to be playing your best football at the end of the year. And I think that's where they're headed, barring some sort of setback, whether it's injury related or personnel related. But I would just kind of preach caution in the early going when it comes to that, because it's a very specific on offense. Chris Hogan has told me a number of times, Josh McDaniels can be a pain in the ass if you're not doing what he wants you to be doing. And so Drake has to learn to, live with that and work with that and kind of figure out, the best way to go forward. So I have confidence that the marriage is going to work, but there are going to be some rocky moments like we saw with the 4 picks on Tuesday.
Fair point.
All right, Chris, I got 2 questions for you to wrap up. I'm gonna throw you totally for a loop here, as I always like to do. So, first question is favorite pizza topping, and then give me a UDFA that's gonna make the roster.
Favorite pizza topping, it's buffalo chicken, and like everyone else is fighting for second place. Like buffalo chicken, I know
I love the conviction, Chris. Come on, give it to me.
It's like buffalo chicken is here. Like buffalo chicken is just miles ahead of the pack. Buffalo chicken is Secretariat. Everything else is the rest of the field. How about that? I'm not a horse racing guy, but there's an analogy for
me. I'm like pepperoni. I'm a pineapple guy. I know it's very controversial. I'm pepperoni, pineapple, maybe a couple jalapeno slices. I love the buffalo chicken top.
We just had a comment. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet on social media, but somebody just posted that Jim Irsay passed away.
Oh,
really?
Wow.
Oh,
we'll have to double check that, but yeah, it's
wow. You want to talk about a family that has had a massive impact on the history of the National Football League over the last 50 years.
That is much different than the route I was going to at this show. But no, geez, that's terrible. Shout out to them. That's terrible. So
Gen AI Pats said, it was a message from the Colts. So
my third favorite game I've ever attended was the Deflategate game. I know that's not really the spirit in the conversation that we're talking about, but it is a Patriots podcast, so we're trying to go ahead and circle it back to it.
And let me give you UDFA. Efton Chisholm.
Is that it? Is he that? We were talking to Evan Lazar, and then we were talking to Field Yates, and we were like, okay, well, maybe I should order my Land Larison jersey right now. So you tell me.
I love his story. I do. I love his story, but
love his mustache.
Yeah, teenage rodeo star. I'm all in on the story. As a reporter, sports writer, you root for the story, and that's the best story. Larison is the best story. But Efton Chisholm is competitive. He attacks the ball. He runs clean routes, at least from what we've seen so far. He's running from drill to drill. He's jumping to the front of the line when he can. He's doing all of the things that you want to see from a UDFA at this time of year. If he does not make it, then they're going to find a way to keep him around, especially if he's able to jump in on special teams and work as a backup punt returner or whatever the case may be. Efton Chisholm reminds me a little bit of, and you guys might remember this name, TJ Moe.
Oh yeah.
Missouri wide receiver who
I still follow him on X.
Yeah, who blew out his Achilles, who never really was able to make his mark in New England. Efton Chisholm has got a little bit of that in him. He's got a little bit of Hogan. He looks competitive. He didn't look overwhelmed at all when we saw him out there on Tuesday. He looked very natural. He looked very composed. He was running with the 2s and 3s, but at the same time, that's where you want to start. And I would submit to you that if he continues on this path, he is either going to make the team or be a victim of the Foxborough flu and go on injured reserve all year. So Efton Chisholm right now is my betting favorite, is UDFA of choice.
Fair enough.
CJ,
Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on, man. It was always great talking with you. Anytime you want to come on, obviously you're more than welcome to. It's always
we'll try not to make it a year from now.
Yeah, we'll try not to do that. Maybe we can touch base sometime in that weird little middle section between training camp and the regular season. If we
definitely, I'll check in with you guys maybe from the land of 10,000 lakes during the joint practices up in Minnesota.
Sounds perfect. Mike, why don't you take us up, buddy?
Absolutely. Well, Chris, once again, thank you for your time and spending that with us tonight and enlightening all of our listeners out there with some of your great wisdom and counsel. Folks, check Chris Price out, the great work that he does for the Boston Globe. Also, I want to give a shout out to the Patriots Report podcast that he does in the Believe Network with Chris Hogan joining him. Some of the great work that you'll see will be on that pod, so definitely check that out. And thank you all for taking time out of your schedule, taking time out of your evening to join us here on Patriots No Huddle. On behalf of my good friend Derek Haven, Steve Balistrieri, and of course Christopher Price, I'm Mike Debate, reminding all of you to stay safe, to stay well, to be the change you wish to see in the world. Have a great day, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to the Pats Fans channel on YouTube so you don't miss a single second of the action here on Patriots No Huddle.
Cool.